Achille Mbembe's critique of Black reason begins by proposing the concept of blackness as a historical construct, representing a form of existence that is neither entirely subject nor object. They outline three distinct phases in the development of blackness. The first phase is characterized by the Atlantic slave trade, which involved the organized despoliation of black bodies, reducing them to commodities and real estate. This period also witnessed the codification of racial difference following Bacon's rebellion in the 17th century. The second phase marks the emergence of black writing, which the author traces back to the late 18th century. Black writing becomes a means of examining the condition of being taken by others, culminating in the dismantlement of segregation and apartheid. The third phase is situated in the early 21st century and is characterized by the confluence of market globalization, economic liberalization, and technological and military advancements. The concentration of capital in this period, accompanied by processes of efficiency maximization, has resulted in the marginalization and seclusion of the black subject on the fringes of society. This has led to the production of indifference or ultracide, making the perpetuation of barbarity psychologically cost-efficient for the privileged. Capital, according to the author, no longer requires the exploitation of the black multitude to function effectively. The author argues that this novel arrangement has given rise to new imperial practices, leading to a universalization of the black condition worldwide. They refer to this phenomenon as the becoming black of the world. Mbembe argues that race functions as a system of constructed images designed to serve the interests of exploitation, preventing any genuine encounter with the authentic subject. The early literature on African exploration, from Jobson to Alfred Dapper, demonstrates how fantasy overshadowed reality, and the public's appetite for sensational and scandalous accounts left little room for accurate ethnographic analysis. These accounts propagated stereotypes of laziness, intellectual inferiority, cunning, and sexual desire, which continue to persist today. These stereotypes eventually provided justification for colonialism and slavery. According to Mbembe, the production of blackness involves establishing a social hierarchy of subjugation and a source of labor extraction. These primitive conceptions of black life emerged long before any serious investigation into African history, sociology, or culture. They were driven by the need to deploy large numbers of laborers within the expanding plantation system, creating a racial subsidy for commercial enterprises. The concept of black reason, as discussed in the book, revolves around the body of knowledge about people and things of African origin, which replaced direct experience and served as the foundation for justifying racial domination. Black reason categorically labeled African subjects as exceptions to normalcy, adapting to the scientific reasoning of different eras, thereby rendering them morally and legally illegitimate, unfit for human endeavors, and suitable only for forced labor. Mbembe argues that remnants of black reason persist in the quest for black self-consciousness, which begins with the question, "Am I truly what people say I am?" In the later chapters of the book, Mbembe proposes engaging with tradition as a means to discover a truth of the self that is no longer imposed from external sources. He draws inspiration from figures like Ames Césaire, Amos Tutuola, Frantz Fanon, and others who serve as guides in this exploration. According to Mbembe, the process of racialization in consciousness began when European indentured servants in America were granted greater rights and privileges compared to African slaves during the 17th and 18th centuries. This distinction was legally enforced and laid the foundation for the racial hierarchy. Scientific racism gained prominence during the peak of colonialism, coinciding with the acceptance of racism in the southern states of the United States, as described by C. Van Woodward. In this context, blackness was reconstructed as an outside world, or a zone where enmity prevailed, exploitation was permissible, and the notion of reciprocity was suspended, drawing upon Schmittian concepts. Although scientific racism presented itself as an objective ideology, it was always intertwined with the pursuit of profit, the exercise of power, and the desire for corruption. This can be seen in various historical events, such as the massive resettlements in South Africa starting in the 1960s, organized attacks on black businesses, and the appropriation of black-owned land in the United States after the Civil War, and the introduction of foreign land ownership in Haiti under Roosevelt's administration. Whether justified by the notion of irreparable black inferiority in the American context or the civilizing mission in the French context, the principle of race, as a distinct moral classification, influenced societal behaviors aimed at maximizing economic profitability. In the latter part of the book, Mbembe shifts his focus from racism to explore the development of black self-consciousness, which redirects and transforms the discourse on race. He acknowledges the significance of the idea of distinct black values that has influenced Pan-Africanist thinkers, ranging from Edward Blyden to Marcus Garvey. Despite his own universalist principles, Mbembe appreciates the capacity of heretical genius in fostering a self-sustaining understanding of the African condition. However, he also recognizes that this understanding itself can be a distortion that needs to be transcended. According to Mbembe, blackness primarily resides in an individual's connection to the black text. The black text refers to the collective memories and dreams of people of African descent, with the central element being the memory of colonialism. Mbembe defines memory as intertwined psychic images that manifest in symbolic and political realms. In this context, the primal memory within the black text is the dispossession of black subjectivity. Mbembe draws heavily on Frantz Fanon's works, particularly The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Masks, in his exploration of black consciousness within the colonial context. Here, Mbembe's dialectical inclinations come to the fore. While he envisions a future where historical memory can be liberated from the constraints of race through a new humanism, he pays homage to thinkers who emphasized the necessity of a specifically black memory to counteract colonial distortions. Without advocating violence, he approvingly quotes Fanon, suggesting that, for the colonized, violence may be the only means to establish reciprocity between the oppressor and the oppressed. In the concluding chapters of Critique of Black Reason, Mbembe explores the possibility of transcending the notion of blackness and envisioning a world free from the burden of race while embracing difference and singularity. He views negritude as a form of situated thinking, born out of the lived experiences of racialized subjects, and calls for the contextualization of blackness within a theory of the rise of humanity. In this positive sense, blackness becomes a metaphysical and aesthetic framework that counters specific degradations of the past and aims towards a future humanism. The central question that emerges is how to fully belong in a shared world. Mbembe acknowledges the dissonance between his optimistic reflections on the dialectical transcendence of blackness and the reality of post-racial America, particularly during the end of Obama's presidency and the subsequent resurgence of overt racism in the Trump era. While Mbembe examines blackness primarily in political terms, present-day racism on the right continues to view black individuals as biological subjects, while discrediting the political implications of ethnicity. Mbembe recognizes the consequences of this decoupling of ethnic origin and political status, which has led to the erosion of protections for African Americans and the revival of harmful stereotypes. He criticizes post-racialism as a fiction and instead advocates for a post-Caesarean era, where the signifier black is embraced not for solace, but as a means to obscure the term and gain distance from its limitations. In the epilogue titled "There Is Only One World," Mbembe discusses the progressive devaluation of productive forces and the reduction of subjectivity to market components that can be exploited algorithmically. He addresses existential questions about the nature of the world, the relations between its parts, its telos, how it should end, and how one should live within it. To formulate a response, Mbembe asserts the need to embrace the vocation of life as the foundation for political and cultural thinking. He concludes by referring to the concept of the open, drawing on ideas from philosophers like Agamben, Heidegger, and Rilke. This notion signifies a state of plenitude, a lack of resentment, where care becomes possible through the acknowledgement and inclusion of the formerly marginalized other. Mbembe views the proclamation of difference as just one aspect of a larger project, the project of an emerging world.